You know, sometimes all it takes is the smell of an old apple pie, cinnamon, nutmeg, little bit of butter crust crispin in the oven, and just like that, I'm back in 1961. Selma, Alabama. It was late August, hot as blue blazes, cicadas screamin' like the world was endin'. I was 20 years old, standin' in mama's little kitchen, wearin' a cotton dress I'd stitched myself, hair tied up with a scarf, 'cause Lord knows the heat didn't let you be pretty for long. She had a fan propped in the window, clickin' and whinin', blowin' the smell of that pie out into the street like it had someplace to be. I remember I was hummin' along to a Sam Cooke song playin' on the radio, tappin' my foot on that scuffed linoleum, waitin' on someone who was already late. Funny thing is, I wasn't just waitin' on a man. I was waitin' on a version of love I'd only seen in the movies, the kind where he notices when you change your hair, the kind where he brings flowers without a skin. But what I got was someone who remembered the mileage on his pickup better than the color of my eyes. Land sakes alive, I don't know what brought that memory back so clear today. Maybe it was the pie I burned this morning, maybe it was the letter I found tucked in that old cedar box, and signed, edges yellowed, still smellin' faintly of tobacco and Old Spice. Or maybe it's just that some days the quiet is too loud, and your heart starts pokin' at old wounds like a child with a loose tooth. You see, I don't talk about him much. No use stirrin' the ashes, Mama used to say. But today, I felt it. That ache, not sharp like it used to be, no ma'am. More like an old bruise that still twinges when the rain comes in. And I reckon it's time I tell this story, not for him, Lord, no, but for her, the girl I used to be. And for you, child, wherever you're listening from. Maybe there's a part of you that's been sittin' quiet too long, waitin' on someone who ain't never gonna come in the door with flowers. Back in my day, we didn't talk much about hurt feelings. We made do with what we had, and if that meant settlin' for half-hearted love, well, we just swallowed it like castor oil, bitter, but supposed to be good for you. But I'll tell you what, some folks don't deserve your silence, your soup, or your second chances. I kept that letter for 40 years, don't ask me why. Maybe part of me was still hopin' he'd come back and finish signin' it. But sittin' on this porch today, listenin' to the wind move through the pines, I realize he never really started. And I gave so much of myself to people who didn't even know how to hold it. People who looked right through me while I was standin' in front of them, holdin' their dinner, their babies, their broken promises. So I guess that's why this story's been itchin' at me lately. 'Cause I've learned a thing or two about love, and let me tell you, sweetheart, love that don't see you, don't ask about your day, don't notice when your shoulders sag, that ain't love. That's shadow. And I lived in shadow too long not to recognize it when I see it on someone else's face. This story, it's not about anger. It's not even about regret. It's about waking up. And baby, I hope you listen close, 'cause this ain't just memory. This is a map. And the road I took? I wouldn't wish it on a soul that still has time to turn. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Lord have mercy. Sometimes I close my eyes and I can still hear the screen door slam. Smell the red dust risin' off the road, and feel that sweet Alabama sun layin' soft on my skin. Back then, the world was small, just the length of our dirt road, the church bell ringin' Sundays, and Mama's voice hummin' while she shelled peas on the porch. I was a barefoot girl with knobby knees and big dreams, runnin' wild with my cousin Nettie, chasin' dragonflies till the sky turned orange. We didn't have much, didn't have a pot to pee in, as Daddy used to say. But we had biscuits with sorghum, we had music on Saturdays, and we had each other. I grew up in a shotgun house just 2 turns past the train tracks, with a wood stove in the kitchen and a wash tub out back. My daddy worked at the mill, came home with sawdust in his hair and calluses that could tear bread like paper. Mama raised us 5 kids with firm hands and a soft heart. We didn't talk about feelings. Feelings were something you stirred into sweet tea, not something you said out loud. But she showed love in her own way. Extra cornbread on your plate, quilt tucked under your chin when you fell asleep on the floor. Back in those days, I thought life would be like one of them storybooks in the schoolhouse. Boy meets girl, boy brings flowers, girl wears her best Sunday dress, and they dance at the county fair. I used to lie on my belly on the porch swing, feet kickin' the air, scribblin' in a little red notebook I kept hidden in the flour tin. I'd write poems about honeysuckle and heartache I hadn't felt yet. I believed, land sakes, I believed that if you were good and kind, folks would treat you the same. That love meant stayin'. that people always came back if you waited long enough. I was 16 when I first saw him, tall, with a crooked smile and hands that looked like they'd fixed things. He drove a rusted Ford and smelled like cedar and summer sweat. My heart, foolish thing that it was, skipped like a record on a crack. He wasn't loud or mean, not then. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you mistake for depth when you're too young to know better. He called me Vi, short and soft, like it meant something. And Lord, I thought it did. We courted slow church picnics, walks down by the river, sittin' close in the back pew when Reverend Johnson wasn't lookin'. He never said much, but I filled the silence with all my hopes. I thought I could make him happy just by lovin' hard enough. Thought if I kept the house clean and learned to cook like Mama, he'd look at me like I was the prize. But even then, looking back, there were signs, little things. He never asked about my day. Never noticed when I cut my hair. Gave me a brooch one Christmas I'd admired in the store window, but it was the wrong color, and he never saw the difference. Still, I told myself, that's just how men are. That's how we did it in those days. You didn't question. You didn't expect too much. You smiled, you stirred the pot, and you kept your worries to yourself. I thought love was given without a skin. That it was noble to be quiet, to wait, to hope. But child, let me tell you something. There's a difference between being patient and being forgotten. And back then I didn't know the difference. That little girl on the porch swing, she believed the world would meet her halfway. That kindness was a key that fit every lock. But sometimes doors don't open, not 'cause you're not worthy, but 'cause they were never yours to open in the first place. Now I ain't telling you this to make you sad. I'm telling you 'cause we all start somewhere. And the beginning always feels like a promise until it don't. It was the 4th of July, 1958. I remember 'cause Daddy had let off a sparkler for the little ones and the fireflies were blinking, like heaven was trying to send us a message. We were all gathered at the church field behind Reverend Sim's house, long tables covered with checker cloths, deviled eggs sweatin' in the heat, gospel music playing, soft from somebody's old Crosley radio. I was wearing a pale yellow dress Mama had sewn special for me, like cotton, with a little lace collar. Said it brought out the gold in my eyes. I didn't feel particularly pretty, but I was 17 and hopeful, which sometimes feels prettier than anything else. And that's when I saw him. He was lean, wearing a white button-up with the sleeves rolled, hands in his pockets like the world didn't worry him none. His name was Charles Bennett, folks called him Charlie. He'd just come back from some odd job up near Birmingham, working on someone's roof, or maybe in a mechanic's shop. Stories varied, and I didn't care to know the exacts. What I noticed was his quiet. Not the kind that feels empty, no, his quiet had weight, like he was carrying whole thoughts he didn't need to speak out loud. Our eyes met for just a second, not even enough time to catch my breath, but Lord, it was like someone rang a bell deep inside me. I couldn't explain it. My heart, it didn't just skip. It stammered. I looked away too fast, embarrassed by something I couldn't name. I remember Edna, my friend back then, leaning over and whispering, "You're blushin', Fime. Land sakes, you better fix her face before he comes over." I pretended to laugh, but my hands were shaking a little when I reached for my lemonade. He didn't come over that day. But he saw me. And that, at the time, felt like enough. A week later, I was helping Mama hang linens out back when I heard his truck rattle up our road. Slow, cautious, like he was checking if he belonged. He tipped his hat to Daddy, asked if I might like to walk down to Miss Nettie's Peach Grove for a soda. I looked at Mama, who raised an eyebrow but didn't say no. And that's how it started. Not with fireworks, not with grand speeches, just a walk through tall grass and the scent of peaches, our hands never touching, but our shadows falling side by side. He wasn't like the boys I'd grown up with, the ones who talked too loud and tried to impress you with things they didn't understand. Charlie listened. Or at least he made it seem that way. I remember telling him about my dreams, how I wanted to travel, maybe be a nurse or a teacher, maybe see Chicago. He just smiled and said, "You got the eyes for dreams, Fi. Big ones." That one sentence, it sat in me like warm bread on an empty stomach. Nobody'd ever said nothing like that to me. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that was the start of the waitin', of filling in the blanks he left, of hearing what I wanted in the silences he gave me. At 17, I didn't understand that some folks are drawn to light, 'cause they can't make any of their own. That listening ain't always the same as caring. I just thought he saw me. And maybe he did, in a way that suited him. But child, being seen and being held, those are two different things. Still, that day, that moment in the grove, it lives in me. I can still hear the buzz of the bees, the rustle of my dress, his voice low and kind, and something in me even now aches for that girl. 'Cause she didn't know what was comin'. She just knew she was Fallon. And Lord help me, I didn't try to stop her. I suppose the first real crack came the summer we moved into that little shotgun house near the train yard. Not the one I grew up in, but the one Charlie brought me to after we married down at the courthouse. No flowers, no white dress, just a borrowed pair of gloves and a cousin for a witness. I told myself I didn't need nothing fancy. I was a wife now, and that was enough. That's how we did it in those days. You were grateful to be chosen, even if you had to choose yourself second. But Lord, I wasn't ready for how quiet things would become. First, I thought it was just adjustment. He worked long hours at the garage, came home dirty and tired. I made dinner. I folded shirts. I lit a little candle every night, 'cause I liked the glow of it on the old tin table. He never noticed. Never said if the stew was good or if my hair looked nice. I waited, thought maybe he just needed time to warm up like old engines do. But weeks turned to months, and I found myself talking to the radio just to hear a voice that answered back. Then came the Sunday I wore that pale blue dress, the one with the small pearl buttons, the one Mama had helped me sew. I wore it to church hoping he'd say something, just one word. I stood by the mirror fixing my hair, hoping he'd glance up from his newspaper. All he said was, "We're gonna be late." That's it. And I remember feeling small. Smaller than I'd ever felt before. Like a breath that never made it all the way out. Around that time Daddy got sick. Heart was slowing down, Mama said. I wanted to go home for a few days, help out. Charlie didn't like the idea. Said it was too much drive-in for something that ain't urgent. I went anyway. And when I got back, the house was dark, cold in a way I hadn't felt before. He didn't ask how Daddy was doing. He just said supper was late. That's when I first started feeling it. That quiet kind of grief, the one that don't make a scene but takes root like kudzu. I didn't cry. Not then. I just folded laundry slower. Stirred the beans quieter. And somewhere deep down I started to wonder if maybe this was what marriage was supposed to feel like work, like watching the sky for a storm that don't come but still keeps you nervous. I didn't talk to nobody about it. Not Mama. Not Edna. You didn't air your troubles back then, especially not the kind you couldn't put a bruise on. I felt ashamed, truth be told. Ashamed that I couldn't make him love me the way I loved him. Ashamed I was lonely in a house that was supposed to be ours. Ashamed that I felt like I was slowly disappearing. And no one noticed. But the worst part wasn't the silence. It was how I learned to live inside it. How I made excuses for him. He's tired. He's not the talking type. He never learned how to love, poor thing. I bent myself in so many shapes trying to make it easier for him to stay. Never once a skin if I even wanted to keep standing, where he never met me halfway. No one really said nothing. Edna just said, "Girl, you always been a little too soft-hearted." Mama said, "Well, marriage ain't always sweet." But deep inside, deep where the old hymns live, I started to know. This wasn't love. Not real love. This was me holding onto a shadow and calling it shelter. And the worst part? I was still hoping. Still believing he might wake up one morning, look at me and see me. The girl in the blue dress. The woman with supper on the stove. The wife with dreams she stopped speaking out loud. But hope, child, it's a fine thing. Till it turns on you. And then it's just another weight you carry pretending it's light. I remember the sound first. Tick tick tick. Then nothing. The little wall clock above the stove. The one Daddy gave us when we married, it just stopped. Right at 4:17. I stared at that frozen minute hand like it was holding its breath, and so was I. Funny how time can stop in a room full of breathing people. It was raining outside, gentle at first, then angrier. I just finished folding the laundry, laying Charlie's shirts in their usual drawer. Always the same place, always the same silence. I'd gotten so good at pretending that the routine meant something that maybe the ritual of lovin' would be enough to make up for the fact that I wasn't being loved back. But that day, Lord, that day unraveled me. Edna had stopped by that morning. She brought a lemon pound cake and a smile I'd come to distrust, too wide, too polite. She used to be my best friend, you know. Since second grade. We shared secrets, swapped dresses, even cried over the same movie stars. But somewhere along the way, she stopped the skin about me and started talking only about herself, her hair, her garden, her husband's race. I kept her close 'cause I thought that's what good women did. We forgave. We made do. But that morning she said something. Casual. Too casual. She laughed and said, "Well, I see Charlie still keepin' up with my car better than his own." Then she bit into that cake like nothing had shifted. But it had. I felt it. Felt it in my bones like a draft through an old window frame. I waited till she left. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just walked out to the porch, sat on the swing and rocked. Back and forth. Back and forth. Rain started coming down heavier, so I went back inside, and there he was. Standing in the doorway, wet boots leaking onto my clean floor. I looked at him. Really looked. And I saw it. Saw the tired lies behind his eyes, saw the way he looked past me like always. Only now I finally stopped looking away. "You fix Edna's car this week?" I asked, voice steady like a table with a broken leg. He didn't flinch. Just said she needed help. That's all. But I wasn't a fool. Not anymore. Maybe I never was, just too tired of being called difficult when I asked questions. I felt my chest burn, not from anger, but from all the times I swallowed my own voice to keep his peace. I remember leaning back against the counter, hand resting on the edge of the sink. My fingers trembled, but my heart, it was still. Still in that awful, quiet way that comes right before a storm breaks open. "I folded your shirts today," I whispered. "For the last time." He blinked. Confused, maybe. But I wasn't. I'd been living in the hollowness of maybe for 17 years. Maybe he'd change. Maybe I was too much. Maybe if I loved harder, quieter, smaller. No more maybes. I didn't pack that night. Didn't shout. I just took off the apron I'd worn for years like armor, laid it on the chair, and sat down to write. Wrote a letter to myself, not to him, reminding me who I used to be. The girl who wrote poems on porch swings. The woman who wanted Chicago, not silence. And I promised her, I ain't disappearing no more. I lost something that day, the last thread of a love that never held me. But I found something too. Found my feet. Found my no. And baby, when a woman finds her no, not in anger, but in truth, it echoes louder than any scream. The clocks still don't work. I kept it that way. A little reminder, 4:17. The minute I remembered I was still alive. After I walked away, the world didn't fall apart like I thought it might. It just kept on. Slower, quieter. No dramatic thunderclap. No applause. Just silence. That heavy kind that sits in the corners of a room and waits for you to speak first. I moved into a little room behind Miss Lavern's house. You remember her, ran the sewing shop near the courthouse. She had a back porch with chipped white paint and a bed that squeaked every time I turned in it. I slept with the window cracked open, even in winter. I needed to hear the wind. I needed to feel something that moved, that wasn't pretending. The first mornings were the hardest. Waking up and realizing there was no one to cook for, no shirt to fold, no voice saying nothing in the next room. Just me. Me and that kettle boiling too loud in a kitchen that didn't know my name yet. I'd sit at the table with a chipped cup of coffee and stare out at the fence post where a mockingbird used to land. I remember thinking, so this is it. This is what freedom tastes like, bitter and a little burnt. I didn't cry much. The tears had dried somewhere between the blue dress and the lemon pound cake. What came instead was a stillness, a numbness. I went through my days like someone borrowed, helping Laverne with her sewing, walk in to the market, nod in politely to folks who didn't know I was trying not to disappear. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and not recognize my own face, same eyes, same hands, but the woman staring back had been scraped raw. You lose things in silence, child. You lose pieces you didn't know could break off. I stopped writing. Stopped humming. I couldn't even finish a whole gospel song without my throat closing up. I felt like a house someone left in the middle of building, all frame, no furniture. And Lord, the loneliness, it didn't scream. It whispered. Every time I saw a couple walk by. Every time someone laughed too loud in the next room. Every time I reached for a second plate before remembering I didn't need one. But I'll tell you what hurt the most, it wasn't missing him. It was missing the me I used to be before I gave everything I had to someone who didn't know how to hold it. I kept the skin myself, was I ever really seen? And that question, it sat heavy in my chest like a stone in wet wool. I didn't stop believing in people, not entirely. But I started believing quieter, softer. Like a prayer I wasn't sure anyone was still listening to. I'd watch other women at church, smiling, passing casseroles, carrying their own silent weights, and I saw myself in them. We were all patching up little holes, trying to look whole. My faith in God, in good, in love, it didn't vanish. But it changed shape. It got older, like bones that ache before the rain. I still believed in kindness, but I stopped thinking it was owed back. I still believed in love, but I stopped thinking it meant suffering. And I still believed in myself, though I couldn't always feel it. Some days I just held on to the fact that I'd left. That I could. The world went on. The mockingbird kept singing. And I learned to sit still with the quiet. Learned to live with the ache, like you live with an old injury. You favor it, you respect it, but you don't let it stop you from walking. And slowly, child, slowly, I started to hear my own voice again. It was a Tuesday. I remember 'cause the mail came late and the biscuits didn't rise. I was standing on the back porch of Miss LaFren's house, watching the sunlight fall lazy across the ground. It had rained the night before and the dirt was soft, the air smelled like turned earth and wild violets. And something, I still don't rightly know what, made me walk over to that little patch of empty ground by the fence and start digging. I didn't plan it. Didn't even have gloves. Just knelt right down in my house dress, scooped up that red Alabama soil with my bare hands and started planting the tomato seeds I'd bought weeks ago and forgot about. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was memory. But there was something about sinking my fingers into that ground, something steady, quiet, holy. Like saying without words, I'm still here. I didn't expect him to grow. I really didn't. But each morning I found myself out there watering, check in on those little green shoots like they were prayers I'd whispered into the dirt. And after a while I noticed. I was breathing deeper, sleeping better. In again, soft under my breath when the wind was kind. That garden didn't fix me, but it reminded me I wasn't finished. One morning a little girl from down the road came by. She was carrying a broken doll and looking for her cat. I helped her find it under the porch, all hiss and fluff. When she hugged that scrappy thing like it was treasure, she looked up at me and said, "You got grandma eyes." I chuckled, touched my cheek, and asked, "What kind of eyes are those, sugar?" She said, "The kind that see everything, but don't get mad about it." I sat on the porch a long while after she left. That's when I started thinking, maybe all this heartbreak didn't make me weaker. Maybe it made me softer in the right places, wiser in the ways that matter. Maybe I could still be useful, still be warm, still be whole, even if a little cracked around the edges. I started helping Laverne more with her customers, mended hems, fixed buttons, listened when women came in talking about their husbands, their tired feet, their quiet worries. And I didn't just nod. I heard them. Like I wish someone had heard me. I wrote a letter to my daughter that month, just a small note tucked in her birthday card. I didn't say much, just, you don't have to be everything for everybody. Just be kind to yourself too. She called me a few days later, voice a little shaky, and said, "Mama, I needed that." And Lord, my heart, it lit up like a porch lamp on a lonely road. Little by little, the color came back. Not all at once, not bright, but real. Hope don't always come in the shape of a man or miracle. Sometimes it's a tomato vine, strong and stubborn, reaching for the sun. Sometimes it's a child's silly words that stick to your ribs. Sometimes it's just waking up and realizing your soul don't feel quite so heavy today. That was my second chance. Not some brand new beginning, but a quiet return to myself. And child, once you start remembering who you are, even just a little, the whole world begins to open up again. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm, but not hot, just that kind of soft warmth that feels like an old quilt laid over your shoulders. I'd been cleaning out the hall closet, digging through boxes I hadn't touched in years. Yellowed papers, old scarves, a Christmas card with no stamp. And there it was, that postcard. The one with the faded roses on the front, no name, no message, but thinking of you. I kept it for 40 years. Tucked in a lace handkerchief like it was a love letter when really it was just a placeholder. A symbol of all the things he never said. I sat on the edge of the bed holding it in my lap like it was made of glass. And I don't know what came over me, child, but my hands started shaking. Not with rage. No, I'd passed through that season long ago. This was something deeper. I'd held on to that card like it meant I hadn't been foolish. Like if I just kept it long enough it would prove the love had been real. But that's the thing about ghosts, they'll haunt you only as long as you keep inviting them in. I walked out to the garden barefoot, dress blowing gentle in the breeze, and I burned it. Just like that. No ceremony. No tears. Just a quiet goodbye. And child, it wasn't the card itself. It was everything it stood for. The silence. The waiting. The way I had folded myself up so many times to fit into other people's small expectations. I watched the edges curl and turn black, and I felt something leave me. Something heavy I'd been carrying so long I forgot it wasn't part of me. That was the day I forgave myself. Not him, he had his own reckoning to face. But me. For staying too long. For not speaking up. For thinking that quiet made me noble. For all the times I sat him fine when I was breaking inside. I forgave the girl in the blue dress. I forgave the wife at the stove. I even forgave the silence, 'cause Lord knows, sometimes it's all we had. I said it out loud. Just a whisper, but enough for God to hear. I let it go. And I meant it. I didn't need to win anymore. Didn't need to be right. Didn't need to make sense of why someone didn't choose me the way I needed. I had lived it. Felt it. Survived it. That was enough. That was the closure. After that day, something shifted. I started singing again while I watered the tomatoes. Started wearing my favorite earrings just because. I'd bake peach cobbler and bring it to the neighbors, not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel joy in giving again, without expectation. That fire, that little fire in the garden, it didn't just burn paper. It burned shame, burned regret, made room. And child, the greatest freedom I ever gave myself was the permission to live beyond the hurt. No more pretending. No more waiting for someone to show up and say the right thing. I said it to myself. I am still here. I am not broken. And I ain't finished yet. You know, I spent a good many years thinking love was something you earned by waiting. By giving and sacrificing and holding your tongue so nobody got uncomfortable. I thought that if I was just patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, that someone, maybe him, maybe somebody else, would finally see me. And Lord, how that waiting wore me thin. Like a thread in a quilt that's been patched one too many times. But here's the truth I learned, honey, the one that settled in me like the last light of day. Love don't ask you to disappear. It don't ask you to shrink. It don't ask you to lose yourself just to keep somebody else comfortable. No, love meets you where you are. It holds you with both hands and it makes room for your dreams, not just the ones it likes, but all of them. I've come to see that so many of us spend our lives waiting for people who don't even know how to hold us. We give our time, our hearts, our best selves to folks who don't appreciate it. Not because they're bad people, but because they just don't have the capacity. And that's okay. It's not our job to fix that. It's our job to protect our own light. Back in my day, we didn't say these things out loud. We just carried our burdens and called it faith. We stayed in marriages and friendships that left us empty, telling ourselves that's just the way things were back then. But I'll tell you what, sweet pea, that way ain't good enough anymore. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone who's tired of waiting in the wings. If there's one thing I wish I could tell my younger self, the girl sitting on that porch swing with her red notebook, it's this: you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you you're worthy. Because you already are. Worthy of kindness. Worthy of respect. Worthy of a love that sees all your pieces and holds them tenderly, even the broken ones. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop waiting. Stop hoping. Stop bending yourself into shapes that don't fit. Say, this is enough. This is me. And I am not gonna waste another day on those who don't see my value. I know it's hard. Lord, I know it's hard to walk away from what's familiar. even if it's painful. But I promise you, the moment you choose yourself, really choose yourself, the world looks a little different. The air feels lighter. The sun shines just a little brighter. You young folks wouldn't understand this yet, maybe. But the years teach you what no one can explain, that the most important love you'll ever find is the love you give yourself. And when you hold that love close, you never have to be afraid of loneliness because you carry your own company. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting for someone else to show up and hold your hand. Maybe it's time to stand up, dust off those old wounds, and step into the light you've been carrying all along. I'm not telling you to be bitter. No, ma'am. I'm telling you to be brave. To be kind to yourself first. To know your worth without asking for permission. Because, baby, life's too short to spend it on folks who don't see how brightly you shine. Well, now here we are at the end of this little journey, and I gotta tell you, my heart feels full and heavy all at once. I hope by now you felt like we've been sitting together on this porch, passing the sweet tea, sharing stories like old friends do. Because that's what this is. Not just my story, but maybe a piece of yours too. And Lord knows, life is full of stories like mine, some bitter, some sweet, but all worth listening to. You see, this here tale, it ain't just about a girl from Selma who waited too long and loved too hard. No, child, it's about every one of us who's ever felt invisible, who's ever held on to hope a little too tight, who's ever wondered if their love was enough to make somebody stay. It's about the weight we carry when we give our hearts away, and the strength it takes to bring those pieces back home to ourselves. And that's why I want to ask you something real and honest. Do you believe true love always comes back? Does it have to? Or is true love something else entirely, something patient, something gentle, something that lives in the quiet moments when nobody's looking? I don't have all the answers, darling, but I've learned that love isn't just a grand gesture or shout across the room. Sometimes love is the soft hand on your shoulder when you're feeling lost. Sometimes it's the courage to say enough and walk away. Sometimes it's the peace that settles in your heart when you finally choose yourself. I think back to that postcard, the one I kept for 40 years. And sometimes late at night, I wonder if he ever really understood what he had. Sometimes I think maybe he does. Maybe, just maybe, he remembers me the way I remember him, not with bitterness, but with a little tenderness for what could have been and what wasn't. But I don't wait for that now. I don't need it to be true. 'Cause I found a love that's steady and true right here inside me. A love that doesn't ask for permission, that doesn't fade with the seasons, and that's always waiting to hold me when I need it most. So my dear friend, as you carry this story with you, whether it's a whisper in your heart or a shout you can't ignore, I want you to remember this. You are worthy of a love that sees you, that holds you, and that never lets you forget your own light. And if that love hasn't found you yet, don't lose hope. But don't wait on it either. Live your life so full, so fiercely, that you can't help but shine, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the love you've been waiting for was inside you all along. Now, I'd love to know, what do you think? Does true love always come back? Or is it something more? Something quieter, maybe? Something that grows with us, even when the people in our lives don't. Thank you for listening, for sharing this time with me. I hope it's given you a little more courage, a little more peace, and maybe a little more love, the kind you give yourself every single day. Until we meet again, child, remember, you are seen, you are loved, and you are never alone.